our third ever cheqdcast streaming live on YouTube and X. Today is Thursday the 27th of March, and if you're just hearing about us for the first time, you can head over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/cheqd, and listen back to episode 1 and 2. We give ourselves a fresh reintroduction and talk a little bit more about our use cases, and you can also learn more on our website at cheqd.io. We are the infrastructure for the trusted data economy. Now, before we get started, as usual, a little bit of a disclaimer from my side. Just want to talk about the token. Due to the nature of some of the conversations you'll hear, very strictly, the cheqd token is a utility token. It's not a security. We are not offering an investment opportunity, and nothing we discuss today is to be taken as financial advice. So, Mr. Producer, please roll the intro. Okay, thanks everybody again for tuning in. So there's a few topics we're going to discuss today. We're going to go over some of the events that we're going to be attending in the coming months, as well as an update on the hackathon, which we set up recently. We're going to talk about some of the recent partnerships and also the recent progress, the success of the completion of the doc merger, as well as some of other pieces of technology advancements in the roadmap, which we will bring in the team to talk about. So for now, if I could just bring in Anchor to start with, Mr. Producer, I just want to have a quick chat about the hackathon and the submissions. Anchor, how are you? Are you well? Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, if you haven't already seen me on the previous episodes, hi, I'm Anka Banerjee. I'm one of the co-founders here at cheqd and also the Chief Technology Officer.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Anka. So, as you did mention, we did talk about the hackathon, which we set up recently, which is currently open for registration. The submissions opened on March 3rd, and the current deadline is on May 2nd. But between sort of when it started, Anka, how are we looking on that at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So if you haven't already checked it out, this is a hackathon that we're running on the topic of verifiable AI, or VAI as we call it. There's a total prize pool worth $50,000 in cheqd tokens as well that is going for it. And what we really want to see is people who are building decentralized identity into products that are building on top of AI. There's a couple of different examples. We've held a couple of webinars so far on how it is you can go and build on the cheqd network. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel. And so far, I think it's still early days, given that the submission deadline is the 2nd of May. We've already started seeing a couple of submissions come in. I've come across maybe 2 or 3 that seem quite relevant and on topic. Some of the others, I'd probably say, they're probably chancing it and submitting
tell
it
us,
to every single hackathon that they come across.
Tell us about that. What do you mean chancing it? Because I know you mentioned very loosely, just that one particular example. Could you please tell us about that one particular example?
There was one submission that is just a literal clone of the Amazon website.
How dare
just
you?
the homepage of the Amazon website.
I mean, really?
Which I don't think it counts under either of those topics as anything to do with verifiable AI or anything to do with decentralized identity. But I think there's like 2 or 3 submissions that I'd say are quite on topic, and I'm excited to see what else comes along as we get closer to the submission deadline.
Me too. Thanks very much, Anka, and everybody else. If you are interested, I just wanted to add to that our partner Verida have also put up 1 million Verida tokens as part of the total prize pool as well. Please submit legitimate work only and free up this. Keep saying the judges who will be looking at this stuff. We don't want to be looking at copies of Amazon web pages, do we, Anka, in future?
I certainly hope not.
All right, no problem. Well, let's see how that goes in future. And remember, again, if you are interested in you listening to this, the deadline is on May 2nd. Mr. Producer, could you please slide in Mr. Edwards and leave Anchor in as well? We just want to have a chat about the recent partnership with Yordi. Hi, Fraser. How are you doing? Could you please introduce yourself?
Cool, happy to. Yeah, so similar to Anchor, if you haven't heard of me so far, I'm CEO and co-founder of Checked. Yeah, I'd hope that someone's or listeners have mostly come across me on the website, on previous AMAs, podcasts, yada yada yada. Yeah, and thanks for having me, Matt.
Not a problem, Fraser. Welcome, of course. Now, so what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to get a little bit more information about these partnerships because I know there's a lot in flight at the moment, and we're going to be talking about a lot of it. But with Yordi, so the collaboration is built on the shared vision and technology synergy is how we pitched it originally. But what does that mean? Could you tell us a little bit about what Yordi is and what's involved in the partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably the first thing to cover is they are from South Korea. So I think that's been fantastic for us. It's obviously a market that myself and Eduardo spent a couple of weeks in last year to try and understand a bit better. Obviously, that was more focused on the crypto side, but we really want to know a lot more around like how the SSI ecosystem was forming. So some like stuff from Samsung and a few others, but we really weren't aware of like anyone actually as a startup building SSI decentralized ID tech out there. And Yordi are really like on the warpath in that respect. So they've built their own platform. We're in the process of building their own platform for kind of taking ownership of data, issuing credentials out. And I think an initial focus on kind of ticketing, but they're touching into AI, I believe, as well. But I think probably the biggest thing for us really is it is a kind of beachhead into the Asian market that we now want to go and capitalize upon because like I was saying, it was one of the reasons why myself and Eduardo were out there last year, was to try and understand that local market. And I think to, I guess, reference it back to our historic approach to markets, we've always looked for local partners who understand their industry and their context. And I think in that respect, Your Data or Your D as the URL is, that's entirely like they understand their own market as well as the wider Asian market as well. So they're not just in South Korea. And therefore, yeah, really looking forward to working with them. They've been fantastic already. Oh, is Matt? I got here, Matt. Can anyone
Yeah,
else?
sorry, I was still muted. I was just going to say, sorry, I was just saying, it's interesting because there seems to be more of this popping out more and more. But what I wanted to understand a little bit more, and I guess the community will be asking, there's been a couple of questions that have come in recently, specifically around partnerships and kind of more interested in the usage on the network. So in terms of what they're going to be doing, can you give us an insight? Maybe this is one for you, Anchor, and what kind of usage on the network we can expect from your data?
I have Fraser, I think you're probably best placed to take this one.
Yeah, happy to. Well, I think it's just I think it's broadly the same as other organisations. So, one thing we've been doing in the background is working a lot on the analytics on both on mainnet and testnet. And now what we're starting to see is like this big, like huge volumes on testnet, and like for full transparency, like none of them are us. Like none of those are checked, like doing load tests on our network. They're all being done independently. And so we're seeing this like massive volume of people testing on testnet. And then we're starting to see that coming through onto mainnet. So we can see that numbers are going up, but we know that there's like the reason there's loads of testing going on testnet is we know there's a bunch of partners who have clients who are going to be issuing credentials in like the thousands to potentially millions. So like, I'd say Your Data is indicative of that in that like they're just in the process of integrating and joining, and then they'll be kind of going out, bringing clients on and taking them through testnet and mainnet. And we've been seeing that with partners that we've been working with for a while, where their numbers are going up. But there's quite a few in the pipeline now who, well, sad news the other day, but Sovereign obviously finally confirmed that they are shuttering. And we've seen like a wave of adoption and a wave of people coming across already for exactly that reason. So yeah, I'd say like Your D and Your Data are kind of indicative of like they're in the process of integrating. Then we'll see good traffic on testnet, and then that coming through to mainnet. I think probably the one thing that we're probably going to see more of is announcements like Doc, where they're starting to name clients, they're starting to reference people. So I think that's going to be fantastic as well, as it's not just going to be of like we've got a partner on board. It's like, okay, there's this actually running on top of it, and or there's a product being built. So there's a few of those as well that we're kind of aware of that are already doing some volumes on mainnet. And there's one in particular, I think Anki will know exactly which one I'm on about, where that when that gets released, it's going to be really cool because I think it is more pitched to anyone being able to use it rather than being a B2B use case. So anyone will be able to go and get their hands on it and start playing around, which will be really cool.
Lovely, thank you. I guess I'm looking forward to what those metrics will look like, and the tool we'll talk about how we'll get that information. We'll sort of mention loosely later. But you did actually mention Doc as well. We've reached another great milestone, which I'm guessing is actually quite a relief given everything that's gone on. We finally completed the Doc token swap, which previously was the migration now. A lot of people will be wondering sort of what was involved in that process. So the final parts, I guess, Fraser, it was essentially the closing down of the node to sunset the network and then finalizing any tokens on that side, right? Where are we with that at the moment?
Yeah, exactly. So very, very final stages. So we had a few, I think that the deadline was a week last weekend or something. And basically post that we were aware of a few basically laggards that for whatever reason couldn't come in beforehand. So I think there was one that just like needed to unbond at the right time, but there was also a case where Doc needed to keep the network running to basically allow those migrations to happen, and that required a certain amount of stake to do so. So then now they're cutting that across. So we're basically going through that process now of like finalizing all the amounts, making sure everything is closed off. We, as far as we're aware, haven't had any further requests like beyond the ones that we were already aware of. So just finalizing amounts, and then it'll be final calculations, go and issue, I'll kind of do the calculations, figure out how many tokens we're burning, burn those off the network, make that announcement, and that'll be it all closed. And I think we've already mentioned before, all of Doc's traffic is already over, both on mainnet and multiple times on testnet, because we've seen them running load tests for a very good reason. And that'll basically bring the whole thing to a close. And outside of all of the migrations, like we're already seeing like their traffic kind of increase on both testnet and mainnet. So yeah, it's just wrapping that all up. And I think one thing I probably should kind of flag is it has been a pretty colossal amount of effort, I'd say, across all respects. Like it has not been, I would say it's been difficult, but it's just been like a lot more effort than we probably thought it was. And I think probably the bit that I would really call out is there's been a lot of like Anchor's time, the dev team's time.
Yes, I was just going to say.
Yeah, exactly. Migrating all of that across, and it's why we're calling it. We'll get onto it with the roadmap, but it's why it's called out explicitly per quarter. Is like we are now spending time per month, like every single month, every single quarter, like migrating people across. I know there's one that's probably coming around next week. There's been like others since the start of the year. So I think it's just going to be an ongoing like facilitating people coming on board that we now need to, account for. But yeah, so a big kind of shout out to Anchor, Tassos, and like everyone who was involved in bringing all that traffic across.
Yeah, I was just going to bring you in there as well, Anchor, because you must have been quite relieved of that process. 4 years of building up to this point, to specking everything out, getting the transactions in place, all of those, the identity functionality in place. It must be a pretty proud moment as well to finally have seen that over the line, and knowing next time, when we migrate people over, it's just going to be pretty seamless, right?
Hugely so, and especially as we've been building out the identity analytics APIs that we've at least been able to start using internally. Just seeing some of that volume to come across has been fascinating. I think we've got about like 350K that's on testnet, and like a large portion of that comes across from the Doc migration. And so just being able to look at that, and the whole network and all of our infrastructure just took it. We were up a couple of times in the evenings when they did their migration. We didn't even have to go and touch anything. The network was just capable of doing that. I think that's been a very good case study in terms of what we are able to go and tell other people who want to
Yes.
migrate across the network as well. And they're mentioning very similar numbers in the hundreds of thousands of DID linked resources, as we call them, or DIDs that they want to bring across. And it's like, yeah, that sounds fine. Like, that's completely doable within the network. I think that's been good to see.
Highly optimistic. The other good thing is about this is every partner that Doc on board is also running on the network. They've also just announced their latest partnership with Identity Fusion. They're looking to bring up-to-date identity solutions to identity and access management systems, right? So there's going to be a whole plethora of this stuff that's coming down the pipeline, and knowing that the network can, as you said, Anchor, just take it, is very optimistic from the adoption side of things going forward.
Exactly.
All right. So now one of the main things of the discussion today that I want to talk about is the roadmap. We have just recently published the roadmap, and I know we were kind of loosely working out some of the direction of where we wanted to go. So, Mr. Producer, I am just going to open up a link. If you, it's down. I want to talk about the roadmap just very quickly in terms of what we've included in Q1. And the first question is, before we actually dive into what's in the 2025 roadmap, was there much that had to be carried forward, or do we feel we met everything from the 2024 roadmap enough so that it didn't need to be included? I guess that question maybe for yourself, Fraser, for now.
I think there was only one, I guess one or two. One that we've mentioned on the roadmap, and one that we haven't, because I think it was just like it kind of went under migration. So the one that's kind of carried over is the shifting network pricing into like stable dollar terms. So everything will still resolve to check under the hood, but basically all the pricing will become for DIDs, DLRs, even sending transactions, voting, all that kind of stuff will become like standardized into like dollar terms. Big reason for that is just enterprise adoption. It just makes it so much easier. And we're now having it goes back to that volume question. We're now having conversations with partners where they're like, right, like we're expecting a significant number of transactions. How much is this actually going to cost when we go do it? And the answer of like, oh, it's variable, is a challenge. And right now, like it's manageable, but we know that it's something we need to resolve. So I'd say that's the only one that's kicked over from last year. And that was all just down to having to facilitate that doc migration, having to facilitate other migrations, was just something that like took up a lot of like late last year. And then the one that's come across that we haven't explicitly put into the roadmap because it kind of worked under this like, I guess, migration path that is on there, is just finalizing Akapai. So getting like it was pretty much done at the end of last year. There's a little bit that was a hangover into this year, mostly just like tidying it up, make sure the testing was solid, just really kind of making sure all of that was legit. So yeah, I'd say those are probably the only two items. Although Anchor, I don't know if you've got anything else that we brought across.
No, I'd say Akapai was a big one because it depends not just on us, but also an external team of contributors, right? So the Open Wallet Foundation, Akapai stands for Aries Cloud Agent Python, and it's probably one of the most popular software for dealing with the backend, or what do you call, like, the servers on which a lot of decentralized identity functionality runs. So we had to bring a bit of that across because around that sort of December time, we couldn't go through all of the different reviews and testing, as you mentioned. So that one's come across. The other one that might be a bit of a spillover, given that the community discussion regarding it happened last year, would be the one that's related to being able to use other kinds of tokens to go make payments on the network. We called it as beta because It's just extremely new across the entire Cosmos ecosystem and how it gets done. We use, just in a brief sort of thing, we use modules from Osmosis to implement something called fee abstraction that basically allows you to set and specify the fees in a different token like USDC. And then it just uses the liquidity pools under the hood to convert it to check tokens. But because it's not particularly well documented, we did a upgrade proposal to enable that in beta, as we called it, and we've been doing a bit of work in the background to debug and test that. And once we have it fully going, the idea is to go support payments in regulated stablecoins or micro-regulated stablecoins, such as EURE and USDC.
Lovely, thank you.
I think
There's a go on. Sorry,
just one additional item. I think I don't know if Anka touched on it, but one of the most difficult parts of this is there was nowhere else to test this but in prod. So basically, like, that's why we had to release it as beta. Was there was everything else that we normally do, all the ledger releases, all the stuff with libraries, like it gets tested in prod, and when we roll it out, we know it's bulletproof. There's no way of doing that with this, and so it's been a bit more headache, I think, than we are usually used to. So it's getting there, but yeah, as a result, it's classic test in prod, which is a challenge.
Also,
Yeah.
I think you just said we do normally test it in prod. I think that should
sorry.
be.
I was going to say that's not the truth, but I know what you
probably
meant to
not what
say. Yeah.
No,
what I will say though, it's every developer's nightmare. I have actually been there myself, where it's like, well, how are we going to test this? It's like, put it live. You're like, really? It's like, yeah, it's one of those things that you shouldn't really do, and if you're forced into one of those positions, best of luck. Make sure you got all of your eggs in different baskets, believe me. I just want to go further up the top, please, Eduardo, if you could just scroll up, because there's parts of this roadmap that refer to a product survey. Now, there's different parts of it's in different quarters of this roadmap, so I just want to understand or get more information for the listeners of what's involved in the roadmap. You weren't muted, no. But what's involved in the product survey, please, Fraser?
You're probably the best place to take this, Fraser, right? You've been
Sorry, I've managed to cough my way through. Sorry about that. So this is something that myself and Alex have been working on, where I think one of the biggest things from the ledger perspective that we're doing this year is getting the pricing into stable dollar position. Like, that is probably the biggest thing. But it also kind of gave us this big question of, like, what else should we be building that we're not aware of? So I think we're aware of like incremental stuff with Check Studio, with maybe the ledger, other libraries that we maybe want to build ourselves into. But as a result, we then had this question of like, okay, we've got probably like 5 to 8 things that are incremental across SDKs, Check Studio, ledger. So then the question becomes like, okay, which of these are the biggest priority for our partners? Like, which ones of these should we be doing? But there was an extra 2 bits, which are like, maybe there's stuff that we don't know about that we should know about. And therefore, like, the only way we're going to know is by asking other people. And there's also a selfish reason to this beyond those two, which is it's also been a great excuse to go and find out about other SSI or credential companies that we're just not aware of. So stuff like this, where we are getting responses from people that we've never spoken to before. And as a result, we can now start that dialogue and be like, right, okay, one, we've never heard of you. You've never heard of us until this survey. Like, what are you doing? What do you need from us? And also that then feeds really nicely into the, like, what should we be building? Because we obviously have really close relationships with our partners. So we have we have a pretty good idea of what we need to be building. But obviously that's a proportion of the market rather than the whole market itself. So yeah, a lot of that has just been work for, like, prioritizing stuff that we already knew about, but also trying to find out things that we were missing. And I think it's been really, really good. obviously made a big shout about it, got loads of people to syndicate it out. I think probably the next couple of weeks is when we'll start bringing that more into actual results and turning it into something where, yeah, we can take the lessons from it. I wouldn't be surprised if it stays somewhat evergreen, but it's been really invaluable in terms of what we've got out of it already.
Thanks, Fraser, for
I
explaining
think
that. Go on then, Anka, if you've got
also
anything to add.
like at a broader level, where last time we've done a form of this every single year. I think in some of them we've done it more through account management and other conversations that we have with existing partners, prospects. We did run a more like broader industry form of this back in 2022. And as like, what's the state of like, what specifications are popular and which ones are people besides checked, what are they looking at? So we have a form of that running this time as well, so that it ends up being a sort of a cross-industry survey that we can almost go and publish and show off for the industry-wide stats.
Lovely, thank you. Eduardo, if you wouldn't mind just scrolling down the page a little bit, because there are some other items in there. So we've discussed part of this now. If you could just stop there for a moment, please. Now, the community have been asking a lot about analytics. Obviously, we've alluded to part of internal identity analytics on this session just now. What kind of data are we able to get from these analytics, and what can they tell us? What insights can they give us? Can you tell us a little bit about how far we are down the line now, please, Anka?
Absolutely. So I think what we wanted to get a good understanding of is, especially with places like testnet, we've gone through multiple iterations of that testnet. If you look at the technical sort of like the chain ID, it's called check testnet 6, and that's because there's 5 different versions of it that have happened before. And on mainnet, that's not the case. Like, it's been the same chain ID since the beginning. But what we wanted to go and capture is sometimes when you go across to tools like stats.godaddy.com, what it can only do is it can show you things that have happened since one of the major chain upgrades that set it as the testnet ID 6. It doesn't necessarily go and capture a lot of the historical information. And so for completeness, what we wanted to do is build in an identity analytics API that can also pull in all of the historical information. And secondly, to make it a bit easier to go and run analytics on top. Because often when you're using these third-party services, like looking at it on the Block Explorer or looking at it on stats.godaddy, they run a query that almost goes and counts every single transaction from the beginning of the network, which is why you often see that it takes a while to go load those statistics. And so instead of that, we wanted to make it just more indexed, so we can run all of this faster. What we've been able to start doing with that is also look at what are the accounts that are creating these transactions and paying for these transactions. And from that, we've been able to identify which developers are running on our network. And a bit of that has been detective work. It's been going out to people and being like, hey, we see these traffic, we see like, these dids and diddling resources that you're creating. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it has a URL or some other information that is related to the company's name in those itself. So we've been able to piece together and see like, okay, this one's happening from doc. In other cases, we've actually been, it's been helping us with that sort of account management and reach out to then go and understand what sort of like, traffic they have been putting in, maybe what kinds of did linked resources or what kind of use cases they're working on, so that we can better tailor the things in our roadmap for this year. So I think that's probably been one of the most fascinating parts, is going and identifying people that we had no idea were working on the network, because they are completely net new. They've not been outbound sort of reach out from us. It's been almost organically they've discovered and started working on our network, and we've been able to get a lot of insight into those use cases.
That's probably.
I was just going to add that I think one of the big testaments I've taken away from this, I don't know if Anka would agree, is it turns out our documentation is really good, to the point where sometimes people can like launch stuff. Like I found a Dylan conference in South Africa. They've like fully got this like product up and running both on test and main, without ever having spoken to us. They just like built it, and they were like, oh, they were going to get in touch when they were closer to launch, and then obviously we happened to meet in person. But there's been more than a few of those where they've just like got up and running without really having to ask any questions, which has been really, really cool to see. So that was also one of my biggest takeaways is obviously like the analytics has been great. Putting the gating on the faucet has been like worth its weight in gold. But there's also like a testament to how good our documentation is, because people have got up and running without having to bombard us with questions, which has been, really refreshing.
It's one of the things I always found very strong as well. One of the first places I would always look when looking at Web3 projects, let's say, is how good is the documentation, purely from an informational standpoint, to be able to understand what it is that you're about. And I actually always found it pretty strong, and it's something that I've championed. So it's good to see that people who are actually getting hands-on building the stuff on the network are finding the same thing. That's good. And I just wanted to add to the point that you mentioned about being able to identify things from signals and patterns. One of the main benefits and beauty of building on a private network using DIDs is that it will be very difficult for anybody to know who you are, what you're doing, and it's not something that somebody external can do, right? It's only, we've got tools that can do it, and it's not like it's a case of we're going digging. It's just like, we can see through patterns what's happening on the network. I know you've got a call, I think, shortly soon, so you won't be able to stay around much longer. Is that right, Fraser, that I see in the background?
It's 5 p.m, so plenty of time from now.
All right, okay, no worries. Well, thanks very much anyway. The other thing is, I just wondered if you could just move down the rest of the roadmap, please. Yeah, keep going. So now we're getting into the agent stuff. This is the juicy bit. This is where I'm getting excited, because when I first started learning about MCP, when Shonak and Anchor have been talking about it, it clicked for me. It was like, right, okay, this is how identity within AI is going to work. But some people might be wondering what MCP is. What does it do? Anchor, for those of us who might not be as technically aware of this stuff,
Sure.
could you just explain what MCP is and what it does, please?
So it's fairly new as a specification. It stands for something called Model Context Protocol. And it's a way of giving tools to your AI agents. So for example, if you want your AI agent to go and carry out some action in your accounting software, or a lot of coding, it happens on something called GitHub. So if you want to give access to your AI agent to GitHub, how do you go and enable that? And something that people had been doing so far is just going and describing that in the prompt or the comments, but that becomes quite cumbersome, and it doesn't help you in a structured fashion, go and connect to all of these sources easily. So as a specification, it's quite new. It only came out in November 2024, so just about 4 months ago. And it's been designed by the team at Anthropic, who are the creators of the Claude set of foundational models. And what it helps people and tool developers describe is how do you connect to different sources of data, or how do you give a set of toolkits. So for example, people have been going and building extensions that allow connecting to accounting software, allow connecting to GitHub, allow connecting to Slack. So we've been building in what is called an MCP server that allows you to connect to cheqd network and be able to create DIDs, create DID linked resources, read DIDs, read DID linked resources, issue credentials, and so on and so forth. Because as a foundational capability for AI agents and models that need to be creating, reading, verifying those decentralized identifiers, did link resources, credentials, they need to have this core capability. So that's just I guess the first piece of it. Now, what's quite exciting, and this literally happened yesterday.
I was just going to say about your tweet. I noticed your tweet. This is what I want to get onto, because you mentioned to me originally about what it could do, and it's now what it can do, which is the juicy bit, right? Go for it.
Two things happened yesterday. So the first is, so far, you could only use it on Anthropic products. So if, for example, you're using something like Claude Desktop, and again, it's super brand new. There's not a lot of agent software that supports it yet. But in every single conversation that we've been having with our VAI partners and other companies, is just so obvious that this is where the future is going. Yesterday, I did think that if OpenAI doesn't support this, then that's a huge gap, because obviously OpenAI and ChatGPT and so on are extremely popular. Obviously, Claude is the other sort of big foundational model. But quite literally yesterday, OpenAI announced that they will also be supporting Model Context Protocol.
Nice.
And I think what this almost guarantees that every single other foundational model provider is going to follow suit, because OpenAI is the market leader in this space. And I wasn't sure if they would, because it's been the spec itself has been created by a competitor, but it's just so brilliant as an idea that I think they're taking it forward. The second thing that happened, not yesterday, but 2-3
Recently.
sort of like 2-3 days ago.
Yeah.
Again, because it's very new as a protocol, you have to be quite proficient as a developer to get up and running with it. You have to run it currently as a Docker container, as it's called, which is probably fine if you're a developer, but it makes it harder for the general audience to go and create these plugins or toolkits. This week, what they announced was an evolution of MCP that just allows you to go and configure this as a plugin or a service. So you'd just be able to click connect to service on ChatGPT. It would throw you to that service and then configure it as a source. And I think what's very fascinating is every single Oops, I think I muted myself there.
Yeah.
Every single VAI partner that we've gone and spoken to has gone like, yes, that is absolutely the kind of foundational capability that we want to be going and using. Also, surprisingly, we've not seen anybody else go and implement this for decentralized identity. So this would be, I think, one of the first, if not the first, MCP plugin to allow agents like Claude Desktop to be able to interact with any form of decentralized identity.
That's actually really exciting, because there's nobody else out there that, certainly that I'm aware of, that has done anything even remotely close. I know there's a few that might be talking about it, a few others that might be talking about Know Your Agent, but in terms of actually having something physical, tangible, something you can see, something that actually works, we've got there now. But what I want to know is what's next. I know we've been experimenting with this stuff, and I know it's been very successful up to now, but I guess the next iteration for me is when are we going to get to trust when it comes to agents? What does that look like when it's trust? And I guess the concept of maybe this one's for, I don't know, maybe you both can, the concept of applying trust registries for agents so that there's a strong signal of what they can use. I mean, I know we mentioned loosely we were going to talk about how this would work for Know Your Agent, but Fraser, I suppose I'm just going to put this one forward for you. Tell me a little bit more about the concept of trust registries for agents.
Oh, interestingly, we were working on all the trust chains and schemas earlier on today. So myself, Anchor, and Alex were kind of on a call, just kind of like, okay, we know that we've got the infrastructure, but like practically, what does this look like? So, as an example, there's the AI Agent Act in Europe that Anchor flagged, and I think from our perspective, if you're Web2 enterprise, there's going to be a value to having your agents audited to fit within that regulation. But also, I think then subsequent to that, there's going to be value in having accreditations that your agent has been, let's say, been through a security audit. Because I think one of the terrifying vectors of agents for SSI is they could go and access all of your data. Like that is a potential thing where, like the old the paradigm in theory of SSI was you're going to have to start going like after individuals. If you want all of their data, you're going to have to go one by one. Whereas if you do a supply chain attack on an agent that everyone uses, you could just hoover up all of their data. So I think there's then, having attestations or credentials saying like, yes, this agent has been kind of verified by or been through a security audit. But then it also gets down to, let's say I'm an organization, I'm a company. The example we were using was an insurer, corporate insurance, for example, where they have brokers and they'll have specific brokers for specific kind of coverage. So it might be like marine, it might be terrorism, it might be like commercial vehicles, all that kind of stuff. And if you have each of these brokers with a specific remit, it will then become very important that you as a company can control who represent, like which agent is representing you, and that it's discoverable by other people, and that you can then take them in and out of rotation and change their scope as required. So I think the way that we were looking at this was kind of multiple trust registries, multiple set of attestations, agents themselves having multiple attestations, being able to prove them. Then we were into like, how do you surface them into the kind of the interface via things like MCP? So Alex's example was having like a command where it's like /who is, and then the agent would have to be like, here's everything about me that I can prove, and then you can go and independently check it elsewhere. I think IQ had a similar idea around like using QR codes. There's all these various different bits and pieces, and that's just on the company side. Then there's like the individual side of how would you do something similar without having identities of agents and identities of individuals on Ledger. And just a really quick aside on something that happened today, so there's no way it was making it into the agenda for this. Myself and Alex were listening into the European Blockchain Sandbox earlier, and the conclusions they're coming out, the recommendations. And something we've been saying for years, we finally saw written down on paper from lawyers and regulators, which is like hashed data of individuals on Ledger is not anonymous, and it does fall under GDPR as a problem. And so this whole idea of like, oh, I can have something on Ledger that's a hash version of my identity that's linked with an agent is, and they're going to come out with the recommendations very soon. But I think that's, a perfect. It's weird timing, but it very much justifies. Like Anchor was really hot on this, like the split between agents representing companies and agents representing people cannot be treated the same way because of potential privacy leakage. And there's basically going to be recommendations and stuff coming out from the blockchain sandbox that we've been part of that literally spells that out, which is going to be fascinating.
Sorry, just a second, Fraser, before you move on, just so I understand that correctly. What does that mean for could that be a problem for the projects that are writing this data to Ledger as well when it comes to larger scale adoption? Because that's what that sounded like. Because I wasn't on the call, you see, so this is new to me.
Yeah, there's no, and it was we haven't seen all the recommendations written down, but I think where it will hit is enterprise adoption. Like it's fine for like Web3 crypto where it's a bit more loose and whatever. But I think where it's going to come down to a problem is like when you put it in front of lawyers for big corporations and they go, wait a minute, like this is written permanently somewhere. We know that it falls under like, it's not compliant with GDPR. Like we can't touch this anymore. So I think that's where it's become more of an issue. It's not necessarily like, I don't know, people doing DeFi trading, whatever, like it is what it is. It's a bit of the Wild West. It hasn't got that much regulation around it. But if you're suddenly going to start having agents that are written onto a ledger and it's very obvious that they're tied to an identity, that's going to be a problem, especially if you can make the link between the two in a way that it's not revocable, it's not like unlinkable, and it's not anonymous. That's going to be an issue. So I think it's going to go industry by industry.
Yeah, and just to give an example of
Wow.
that, I think there's a difference between um, a, a, a credential or an accreditation that, say, OpenAI receives or Claude receives, which says it has been security audited to this standard, or it complies with these certifications, or it's in a list of trusted agents that has been created by this industry body. And there's a slightly different question, which is what are the permissions and choices that Matt has made when using ChatGPT or any of these AI agents? So I think the things that are related to agents or companies will probably get written on chain, but things that are related to individual options and choices shouldn't be getting written onto
Agreed.
chain. A, that's
100%.
because that's a lot of traffic, but B, also because there's a lot of personal information that comes into scope in that. So I think making that distinction is quite important. The other thing I'd say is, I think one of the questions you asked was, what happens next? Part of it is the fact that model context protocol and specs like these are just entirely brand new, and they're almost changing on a weekly basis. The assessment that we did a week ago on what it means to support MCP is already out of date
Yeah.
with the new
So
things that. So what's fascinating, I think, if people want an insight, is to go to the Model Context Protocol website and check their roadmap, because what we would love to do is be able to add support for the items that are there within the MCP roadmap and the capabilities that it enables for AI agents, because I think is going to be one of the big ways in which AI agents have to interact with decentralized identity.
what about each other? What I mean, so we're not going to be too far from the realms of that as well. And so,
Exactly. So
yeah,
I think so that's one of the aspects of this, which is AI agents are going to need a wallet in which they're storing their identity credentials.
yes,
So, for example, that is not something that exists at the moment,
yeah,
and we are almost building it in as a sidecar with this MCP plugin. But I think this evolves to the point where it is perhaps going to be natively built into AI agents, that they have an identity wallet that it comes with, so that it can hold credentials on behalf of the humans that have given it a certain level of permissions of what they're allowed to do. But they'll also have to show that on an agent to agent basis. How does an agent trust another agent that it's encountered on the topic of travel bookings or DeFi alpha to go make investments on behalf of something? So yeah, I think where it becomes interesting is this perhaps evolves to a point where AI agents themselves come with identity wallets that they keep.
yeah. This is all pretty exciting stuff for me. Watching all this come together now, I am actually interested to see where this is going to go. Sort of like 4, 6 months down the line, when it's evolved to a point where it just becomes second nature, and we'll be looking back thinking, wow. The other thing I wanted to mention, I guess the decision to write DIDs on chain and keep verifiable credentials and personal data off chain has turned out to be actually a really good decision. I think it's fair to say. So nicely done on that one. But anyway, so Eduardo, I think if you could just scroll down the rest of the roadmap, please, if you wouldn't mind. I think we're sort of want to get to some more technical bits. Some people in the community were asking questions, Anka, around the Cosmos 5 upgrade and around ABCI++ and what this means for the ledger, essentially. So, could you talk us through what we foresee being a benefit for moving to the Cosmos V5 upgrade?
I think a large part of that is things like IBC v2 or IBC Eureka, as it's called, which natively enables a lot of linkage with Ethereum networks, and I think that's been some of the most exciting stuff that's been coming out from the Cosmos team itself. Partly, it's also for security reasons. So Cosmos SDK updates get supported for 2 major versions, and we have to be moving across to the newest versions. I think there's another one that's coming out, which is 53x. But that's like really, really new. It's still in beta testing. So I think partly we want to go and enable and complete that full vision of having oracleized pricing in stable dollar terms. And it's much easier to do on version 50 of Cosmos SDK than it is on version 47. Partly it's for security and performance reasons, we have to stay up to date with the latest versions of Cosmos SDK as they come out. And then finally, it's things that are coming down further in the roadmap. You'll see
EVM
one of the
support,
things
yeah.
we want to explore is EVM support, or how do developers who are on EVM chains come use the functionality that is on Check Network on a chain-to-chain sort of basis. And with stuff like IBC v2 or IBC Eureka, as it's called, that becomes dramatically simpler to go and execute on. It's still sort of like in the process of being built out, and there are things that need to fall into place. But yeah, part of the Cosmos 50x story is that.
Thank you, Anka. I guess there's a lot to go over as well as time passes. I mean, I'm interested to see more about what's going to happen with the sandbox, as you've just mentioned. I've got a lot of questions for you after this call, gentlemen. I hope you won't mind. But I think we're coming towards the end of the roadmap now. I don't think there's too much else to cover in there. If you, oh, right, of course. Sorry, yes. Content credentials. Content credentials anchored by cheqdcast. How does that work?
I mean, the hypey bit is like, Anka, would you say there's been one of these issued on the network already, or like, I don't know. I'm not technical enough to know like what
Is this
stage.
from Luke?
Oh well, you've given the game away there, then, Matt. So yes.
Yes, so I think we've got developers who are building on the network on early versions of content credentials, where the identity or the sort of like the root of trust behind those content credentials is based on a checked did. And also using the other sort of functionality like the linked resources. I think on content credentials, where we are also engaging with the standards bodies, is the first spec of content credentials is based on centralized infrastructure, because they wanted to get something very quick and doable out there. The next evolution, which I think is going to be within 2025, is to expand that capability and say this can be done using DIDs and verifiable credentials. And so having all of the functionality for how does a content credential get defined when it's using DIDs and VCs is what we want to build in, because I think there's some very, very massive players within the market that do want to be going and implementing this using decentralized infrastructure, because they see that as more scalable and they see that as more fault tolerant, rather than having to rely on a single sort of centralized service.
Right, I see. Okay. I'm not going to fully pretend I understand a lot of that. I'll have to think more about it later. I don't want to say too much. But going to the next bit, there's one specific part, I'm just conscious of time now, is around the support for X509 certificates. That's one of the other items towards the end of the roadmap. Now, a lot of people might not be familiar with an X509 certificate is, but you use them all of the time on your mobile devices, on your computers, when you're accessing the internet. You could say it's the little padlock at the top left screen of your browser, to put it simply, issued by various certificate authorities and used for different things. Now, from a centralized trust perspective, there's a lot of there's a lot of identity still reliant on the idea of X509 certificates. Now, I actually thought we might move away from X509 certificates, to be honest, as from a central authority perspective. What's the rationale between building in support for X509 on a decentralized identity infrastructure?
No, that I think is a fantastic question, and obviously, I think over time this evolves to people using decentralized identifiers by using decentralized trust chains or decentralized trust registries, as we describe it. But we are also pragmatic about the fact that there is probably an interim period over which some people will need to process trust through X509 certificates or are already using it as some form of trust. And at the same time, they might also be wanting to go and support decentralized trust registries or chains that are based on DIDs. So having the ability to support, allow them to support the hybrid sort of functionality, I think is super important. And that's why we wanted to build in these sort of things that we're hearing back from enterprise use cases to say, like, we would love to use DIDs and decentralized trust registries, but we can't move 100% to that. And because of that, sometimes enterprises don't make the option of moving across to this. And what they sort of what this sort of support allows is a hybrid state where they don't have to make an either or choice and can have parallel systems that are almost running. The most useful context for this is anything that currently needs to support something called OpenID Connect, which is the way that you use login with Google, login with Facebook. Having a form of equivalency to say this X509 certificate correlates with this DID is a fantastic way of enabling DID-based use cases where anywhere they currently use any form of OpenID Connect.
I've got loads more questions. I just for one moment, Anka Fraser. I know you have a hard stop now. I just wanted to thank you for joining us. So I'll just graciously let you go. Before you do you have any final words for everybody else? Thanks for the alpha, by the way. If you caught it, everybody else in the community, please send me a message because I'm sure there's lots to find out from that later.
I think the main message, Matt, is stop tapping the table. We'll have to get you like mittens or like boxing gloves. But no, just thanks for having me. I think I know there's loads more topics we didn't get the chance to touch on, and looking forward to the one in a month because there's a lot coming. That I guess we thought might sneak into this month, but looks like it's going to be in April, so it is what it is. But that's going to be yet another hectic month, but all to the good.
No worries. Well, thanks very much for dropping in. No worries. If you could slide Fraser out, please, Mr. Producer. So, Anka, just so I can get my head around this again, from how would this work at? I don't know if you just explained that, and I just didn't quite get it. How would I use an X509 certificate in comparison with a DID? Would it be used in conjunction with a credential? Would it be written somewhere in an MDoc? What does that look like?
It's a way of dual referencing. So it requires certificate authorities that want to be able to support mentioning what is the linked DID for that particular X509 certificate inside one of the fields within the certificate itself, and vice versa, like having something in the DID that mentions what domain name or what certificate it's linked to. And it allows systems that sometimes need to use the traditional root of trust, like you might need to in OpenID Connect, to understand that this decentralized identifier is equivalent to this particular domain, and being able to then switch that context and say when it's using just decentralized identifiers, it allows them to process it using that sort of thread on its own.
I see. I'm probably going to send you some more questions on this later, but thank you for explaining. I guess in my head, the simplest way to try and resolve it for now is it operates quite similar to how it did linked resources and working in the sense it's got cross-reference in
Yeah.
some capacity, but obviously it's a completely different method of working. Um,
But that itself is probably quite technical than most other viewers would maybe need to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. We can talk about that another time. I guess we're at the top of the hour, though. We've talked pretty much all the way through the rest of the roadmap. We could have had so many other things we could have talked about. There's lots of interesting news on the horizon, which we're expecting going forward. But for now, I think we'll wrap it up and possibly roll that forward to next month, as Mr. Edwards alluded to. Anka, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your insights. There's been lots of bullish alpha there that I'm looking forward to digging into in the background. But before you leave, do you have any final thoughts for our viewers today?
If you have any sort of interest as a developer, please do check out, or know somebody who does, please ask them to check out the Verifiable AI hackathon that we're running. There's $50,000 worth of prizes up for grabs, and some additional bounties from some of our partners. So yeah, give it a shot, and hopefully you send us something more interesting than the homepage of Amazon.
Deadline is the 2nd of May. Let's not get that out in as well yet. Okay, so thanks very much, Anka. Mr. Producer, if you could just slide out Anka, please. Thank you for everybody that's tuned in. Hopefully you've learned a lot from what we shared today. And please keep in mind that our next episode, which is along the bottom, will be streamed on Thursday, April the 24th. Thank you for listening to episode 3 of the cheqdcast. We are Cheqd, the infrastructure for the trusted data economy. Thanks very much for tuning in. Mr. Producer, load the outro.